I'm confused. And I know this is a problem, right? What happens when the innovation guy gets on stage and says that he is confused? What hope is there for the rest of us? I shouldn't say I am confused. I should say I was confused. And I think that this feeling of confusion around innovation is probably something that a lot of us have in common. So this is a safe space. We're all friends. Hi, my name is Max. Just a show of hands if you feel like the word innovation is a little confusing right now. How about even if you just feel like you're hearing this word a lot more, you're seeing this word a lot more, you're reading this word a lot more, are you writing this word a lot more? Well, you're not alone. Innovation, innovate, innovative. This word is being used by more of us more often than ever before. This is a Google Ngram, and it actually tracks every use of written words in the English language. And as you can see, from 1945 until now, we have used the word innovation 5 times more often as a share of every word in English than we did just 70 years ago. If you feel a little confused by innovation, or if you feel a little overwhelmed by innovation, that is because since the end of World War II, it is a word that we use 500% more than we used to. And that is why Wired magazine called innovation the most important and the most overused word in America. That is a very difficult needle to thread, overused and important, but innovation is doing it in 2019. So I want to start first and foremost by saying that you are not alone. Innovation is everywhere. At least the word innovation is everywhere. It is everywhere because it is overused, and it is overused because it is so important. That, to me, is also what makes it so confusing. I've put the word innovation here in quotes for a reason. We use this word sometimes not even knowing what it really means, or sometimes we use words that we think mean innovation. This is our context. As soon as we start reading about something like, you need an innovation strategy, someone else starts writing about how you need to think about disruption. So as soon as we've got a handle on innovation and on disruption, someone else starts writing about innovative disruption. And then you think you really understand what innovative disruption is, but some jerk has just been holding back on his take on disruptive innovation. So eventually you think you've got an understanding about how these things always work together and they're really one thing, and then some other jerk writes about disruption versus innovation. What's the difference? Well, wait, I thought they were the same thing. And just as soon as we start to get a handle on all of that, you think, I've got it. Some company comes around, starts doing really, really well, and all of a sudden we're reading about Uberification. Innovation, disruption, innovative disruption, disruption, innovation. Now, Uberification, which leads to conversations about the Uberification or the Uberization of every industry, like the Uberization of banking. At which point someone writes an article about, this is not a joke, the Uberification of Amazon's global network. We are using the name of one giant tech company to modify another giant tech company, at which point all of this just becomes so overwhelming that we get to the Uberification of everything. That's right, everything. People are actually saying that every single industry is being Uberified. How are we supposed to understand innovation with all of these terms? And when eventually we just get to something like the Uberification, how do I Uberify everything? Like, is that something I can ask Siri to do? Can I just tell her to Uberify everything? Oh, crap, now I've got a fleet of Kia Sorentos that are about to show up here. Anyway, this is the context that we work in with innovation. It's complicated, it's confusing, it is difficult to understand. And the truth is, really, that innovation has never been as confusing as it is right now. Innovation has never been as difficult to understand as it is right now. But innovation has also never been as valued as it is right now. But that doesn't mean that we know how to get value from innovation. So at this point, I always like to take a step back and just ask the simplest and best of all questions. Why? Why innovation? Why do we need this? Why do we think that we need this? Well, there's two really big reasons. And the first is that we innovate or we die. Okay, I know, this seems a little dramatic, and I don't mean that we die, of course, but we are living in an era in which we have seen some of the giants of industry, some of the biggest, most powerful, most venerable brands and businesses and organizations lose market share, lose a leadership position, fundamentally lose everything, file for Chapter 11, fall off a cliff, metaphorically. This is a pretty good example of why we have to innovate. You guys all remember Blockbuster, right? At one point, the absolute biggest name in home entertainment. Everyone remembers on a Friday night going to a Blockbuster and trying to find a movie to watch, walking around for 40 minutes looking for that tape, fighting with your friends to see what you would rent. Who in the room remembers having a VCR? Hands up, please. Who had a VHS? Who had a Beta? I like to joke that my parents were so backwards, we had an Alpha. It's an erudite group. I like this. Who has a DVD player in their house right now? And who rents DVDs? And also, how? I kid. Okay. So look, Blockbuster wasn't undone by another chain of video stores. Blockbuster wasn't undone by one of their competitors figuring something out and growing market share, figuring out how to make a bigger place to go, a blocker buster, a blockier buster, the blockiest buster. Blockbuster was undone by these guys. So this is Netflix. Show of hands, please, if you have Netflix. That's about right. Can you all just look at this for a second? That's an envelope with a DVD in it. When Netflix started, we didn't have this in Canada. We had something called zip.ca that Netflix soon replaced. But Netflix was originally a DVD through the mail service. It was called Netflix because you would pay a monthly subscription fee like you do now. You would go online. You would arrange a Netflix queue. It would send you your top 3 DVDs in the mail with a self-addressed stamped envelope. Mail, I'll explain mail to people later on. But anyway, a self-addressed stamped envelope. And when you were done with your DVD, you would slide it back into that envelope, send it back to them, and they would send you the next one in the queue. I love this because it's barely 15 years old, but it seems so quaint and adorable. It's like getting a telegram or something. A DVD in the mail. This was a hugely innovative, disruptive piece of business. It had a fundamental impact on the Blockbusters of the world. But what I love about Netflix is that 5 years into doing this and doing this really well, they innovated again. They put all of their content onto the device of your choosing, available online, on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, at your television, through your video game console, through your gaming system. Blockbuster thought that their job was to get you to come to them for your entertainment. Netflix understood that their job was to get you your entertainment when you want it, how you want it, on the device that you want. That's an amazing piece of innovation. What I love about it is that they could have stopped and said, look at this DVD through the mail business. Look how well this is doing. And instead, what they said was, I think we can innovate and innovate again. What I love also is that this has transformed how we watch our content now. Who in the room has binge-watched an entire TV show in a weekend? Who's done that thing where it's like 2 in the morning and you're like, just one more? And that turns into just like 6 more or just 9 more. I remember working my way through Breaking Bad thinking, I'll watch just one more episode because I'm sure it gets better for this guy. Spoiler alert, the show is called Breaking Bad. It does not get better for anybody. It also, of course, introduced new and valuable revenue streams to Netflix. They stopped just bringing you other people's content, and they brought you their own. 10 years ago, if I'd been standing up here making a speech about innovation, and I told you that the DVDs through the mail people were going to win Emmys and Oscars, you would have told me that I was crazy. No one would have ever thought that Blockbuster was going to win an Oscar. But here we are a scant decade later, And this is what it looks like. So that is reason number one why innovation is so important. We innovate or we die, and we can't stop. But it doesn't matter how possible innovation is. It doesn't matter how much we can innovate unless we have a market for innovation. And that is reason number two, and that is where these guys come in. Now, first of all, I would just like a quick round of applause. I made it halfway through a presentation on innovation without mentioning millennials, so thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. The folks from Guinness are here to certify this for the world record book. Look, this is an incredibly important group. I make a different presentation about millennials, and I've actually been talking about millennials since before we were calling them millennials. This is not a niche market. This is the single biggest population cohort in North America. It's the single biggest group in our workforce in North America as well. And this isn't my generation. I'm Generation X. I'm not a millennial. But this is the powerful generation. How many of you in the room are millennials? If you're wondering, a millennial is someone who was born between 1980 and 1996. Just a round of applause if you are a millennial, please. A big round of applause. You're entitled to it. I kid. We can all make jokes about ourselves, including millennials. So look, I actually don't believe this at all. I actually think millennials are not entitled in the least. I think this is a super hardworking, interesting, and difficult to understand generation. And I will say often what we feel is entitlement is actually different expectations. A different set of expectations that is often rooted in what they know is possible and what they know can be done. And that really matters when we are talking about innovation. It is not about entitlement. It is about expectations. And millennials demand innovation. They expect innovation in every single category because they know that it's possible. They know that we are living in this golden age of innovation. And so when we haven't innovated, they know that we can do better. They are driving change with this unparalleled appetite for innovation. And not all of this is digital, but a lot of it comes from being digital, this group of digital natives. I'm going to read this quote from a theorist named Jaron Lanier, who said, "We already knew that kids learned computer technology more easily than adults. What we're seeing now is that they don't even need to be taught. It's as if children were waiting all these centuries for someone to invent their native language." I love that quote. It is almost 25 years old. This guy was able to accurately predict the kind of innovation we were going to see a quarter of a century later because he understood that digital natives, millennials, would have a different set of expectations of how things can work. Now look, not all innovation has to be digital. But imagine growing up in a world in which everything you use has been fundamentally innovated over the course of your life. Imagine growing up in a world where innovation is possible, and where if you're not getting it, you can demand it or even make it happen yourself. Who recognizes this? This is the Napster logo. Hands up if you remember using Napster, LimeWire, any one of the peer-to-peer file sharing programs for music. I'm not a police officer, everyone. You can admit to saying this now. It's 2019, everybody. Okay. So Napster was the best. If you don't know what it was, they called it a peer-to-peer downloading service. And essentially what it was this, a way to share digital files. Now, MP3s are about 4 megs, that big. The same music file on a CD was about that big, 75 megs. So at the time, the internet wasn't as robust. It was a little slow. And if you wanted to get a music file over the internet, this smaller version was how you wanted to do it. Let's take a step back. Who remembers the first slogan for the very first iPod? Anybody? It was 1,000 songs in your pocket. This came out in 2001. 1,000 songs now seems like a pretty crappy iPod, doesn't it? 1,000 songs, that's it. I want 1,000,000 songs. So this is 2001. And obviously, to fit 1,000 songs on there, you need those MP3s, those small music files, so you need to get them. Except no one was selling them. I mean, literally, no one was selling them. You could not go online and buy and legally download the music that you wanted to fill the legally purchased product called the iPod that promised you 1,000 songs in your pocket. It was 2 years before we got the iTunes store. I want to quickly repeat that. This thing comes out. It is the hottest device in decades. And yet, it is 2 years before we are providing our young people with a legal way to purchase and download music. So of course they made Napster. They demanded innovation. They expected innovation. And when they didn't get it, they did it themselves. 2 guys in a dorm room were able to fundamentally upend the entire music industry. Apple went from never having sold a song to being the #1 retailer of music across the planet in only 5 years. This is a group that demands innovation, that expects innovation, and that knows that it's possible. And if it's not being given to them, they will go and get it themselves. That's where Napster comes in. So millennials expect innovation because they know it's possible, and they aren't married to the old ways of doing anything. They reward us if we are innovative, and they punish us if we are not. So at this point, I'm going to end with some rules for innovation. I think we understand that the stakes are higher than ever before, that there's a greater appetite for innovation than ever before. And there's a lot of best practices we can put into place. And when I have longer to talk, that's exactly what I love to talk about. But I want to leave people in this room with 3 big rules that they can take with them today and act on automatically. How innovation actually operates in practice, because I don't want that innovation confusion. So rule number 1, innovation is iteration. I'll go back to that iPod or even that iPhone, for instance. Now look, this is a good way to talk about millennials as well. Raised on mobile phones, right? Everyone in this room obviously has a smartphone. 98% of millennials have a mobile phone. Most of those are a smartphone. I work in youth marketing, and I find that unbelievable because when I was growing up, it was about having a phone in my room. Y'all remember that, a phone in your room? Seems practically Amish now, doesn't it? A phone in your room? So that first cell phone was a game changer. That first mobile phone was a game changer. But who had the iPhone 1? Who had the 2? Who had a 3? Who had a 3S? Who had a 4? A 4S? A 5? A 5C? A 5S? A 6? A 6 plus? A 6 minus? I'm kidding, there is no 6 minus. A 7? A 7 plus? An 8? Who had an 8? An 8 plus? Who had a 9? Kidding, there was never a 9. Who had a 10? Who has a 10 right now? Who has a 10S? Do I hear a 10S Max? Does anyone have a 10S Max named after me? Yes, fantastic. That's 20 different iPhones. The first one is a piece of disruptive innovation. Everyone after that is an iteration. Apple isn't the biggest company in the world because they invented that one iPhone. They are the biggest company in the world because they have iterated it 20 times since in the decade that has followed. 20 times since. Some of you right now are looking up there and thinking to yourselves, my God, how much money have I spent on goddamn iPhones? There's a support group for us after. We'll meet later. So that's the biggest misconception about Apple. On a month-to-month basis, Apple really isn't all that innovative. Instead, the company is tremendously iterative, which is a fancy way of saying that they are good at making small, steady improvements over time. I completely understand that everyone gets nervous and confused by all of this. We think that something is going to Uberify and disrupt our entire industry and everything will change all of a sudden. And there is that danger, but it is much smaller than the danger of not iterating. Innovation is iteration. Innovation is iteration. Iteration is the best and most meaningful form of innovation. Listen to your customers and make constant, small, meaningful changes in what you do to give them a better version of what they want, a faster version of what they want, a more accessible version of what they want. Instead of thinking of innovation as something insanely massive that you do once every 3 years at a retreat, innovation is iteration. Rule number 2, innovation, like everything, is people. So I wouldn't want to put anyone on the spot, but is there anyone in the room who wants to raise up their hand and can stand up and give me the names of the 3 most creative or innovative people at their organization? Can anyone stand up and just tell me who the 3 most important people for innovation are at their organization? Look, I do consulting on this around the world. I've had private meetings with the presidents and CEOs of some of the biggest companies on the planet, and no one can do this. So like everything else, innovation is people. Look for the most creative people where you work. Look for the most innovative people where you work. Identify who they are and get a champion for those people as well. We tend to view innovation as some kind of incredible goal, and we don't realize that it is actually people-based like everything else. So identify your most creative and identify your most innovative and give them a champion, give them a channel. And 3, perhaps most importantly, innovation is what you do today for a great tomorrow. I want to remind everybody in this room that innovation is a process. It's not a goal. You don't work for innovation companies. You're meeting planners and conference planners. You work at private organizations. You work with internal teams. You run themed conferences, events. You have people to whom you report, who report to you. But you're not innovation companies. None of us work for innovation companies. And we tend to think that innovation is our goal. It is not. It is a process. And innovation is the process by which you make sure you matter as much tomorrow, or you matter even more tomorrow than you did today. Jack Welch said this really well. He said, find a better way every day. That means baking innovation into your organization's operating system. It means listening to the people who say that they have a new or different idea. But more than anything, it is making sure that innovation isn't something you do once every couple of years or once a competitor has done something significant. It is a way of operating, and it needs to happen every day. So make innovation your habit and not your goal. Make innovation your habit and not your goal. We all want our tomorrows to be as bright or brighter than they are today. Making innovation your habit isn't just the better way, it's the only way. Thank you very much.